The reaction system in Baldur's Gate 3 has been a sore point in the community for a while now. I mean, it's been a frustration as far as I can tell since the very beginning of early access. The complaints typically are that Larian's implementation of reactions is unfaithful to Tabletop 5th edition, or that Larian's implementation of reactions steals control from the player, or of course, it could be both. Now, this frustration has simmered in the background for a while now, but since the release of Patch 8 and the Bard class, it's really turned into a boil. That's because the way Larian implemented the Bard class, particularly the cutting words feature of the College of Lore Bard, has started to get people thinking that they actually like the way they've implemented reactions so far, and that they don't intend to change them to be more faithful to 5e by full release. Cutting words is a feature that allows a College of Lore Bard to use one of their Bardic Inspiration dice as a reaction to mitigate an attack roll, skill check, or damage roll of an enemy. At least that's how it works in Tabletop. In Baldur's Gate 3, you use it on a bonus action. You expend one Bardic Inspiration die on a bonus action to impose a status condition on an enemy until the beginning of your next turn. While the enemy has that status condition, any attack roll, damage roll, or skill check that they make automatically gets reduced by a roll of your Bardic Inspiration die. So, on their turn, if they make an attack roll, you roll a Bardic Inspiration die and subtract your roll from their roll. If the attack still hits, you do the same thing but for their damage roll. And all of this only costs one Bardic Inspiration die from your pool, even though you're rolling that die multiple times. To compare the two implementations, Larian's version is technically speaking more potent, but you do have less control. So, it's more potent because you expend one die, but you roll it multiple times, as I've said. I've mentioned there's the possibility that you roll it twice on an enemy's turn if they hit an attack roll, but it's also possible that they make an attack not on their turn, but while they still have the status effect. For example, if you proc an attack of opportunity, they're going to make an attack roll, and you subtract from that attack roll. If that attack hits, they do a damage roll, and you subtract from their damage roll. If you shove them while they have the status condition, that's a skill check, and you're going to subtract from their acrobatics or athletics roll to resist. If one of your allies tries to hide within view of them, they're going to make a perception roll, and you subtract from that. You get the idea. It's possible with one expense of the dice to subtract from their rolls 3, maybe 4 times. By contrast, in Tabletop, one expense of the dice only ever equals one subtraction from their roll, but you get to carefully choose which roll you want it on. And this matters in a situation where what you really want the cutting words for is to, say, reduce a specific attack or skill check. For example, imagine your squishy wizard, Gale, is in trouble. You want to use cutting words to mitigate the effect of an attack against him. But there are 2 enemies that could attack him. Let's say Goblin A or Goblin B. In Baldur's Gate 3, you have to predict which one of them will attack him. Let's say you choose Goblin A. You use cutting words on Goblin A. But instead of attacking Gale, Goblin A attacks Lae'zel. All of the effects of cutting words would work against him, but it's on a roll that you don't actually care that much about. And then Goblin B ends up being the one who attacks Gale. Now you don't have cutting words to try to reduce his attack, and the thing you really wanted cutting words for failed to happen. This would never happen in Tabletop, where cutting words is a reaction. In the same scenario, where Goblin E doesn't end up attacking Gale, you just wouldn't use cutting words. And then when Goblin B uses it, you'd have your reaction available to cutting words their attack. So again, while technically more potent, in Baldur's Gate 3, you have less tactical control. In contrast to Larian's implementation of reactions, people often bring up the game Solasta, which implements reactions through a pop-up system, which is extremely faithful to how it works in Tabletop. Every time your Paladin lands a hit and they have a spell slot remaining, a pop-up appears asking if you'd like to smite. Or if you have a wizard who can cast shield, and they get hit with an attack that otherwise would miss if you cast shield, a pop-up would appear asking if you would like to use your reaction to cast shield. You get the idea. These pop-ups appear often. They are a primary feature of Solasta's gameplay. And people, like me, still love the game. It really works, in my opinion. I don't mind that the pop-ups slow down combat, because the whole point of combat is making interesting tactical decisions, and pop-ups allow that. Also, as I've said, this system in Solasta is very faithful to 5th edition. When you play Solasta, it does feel like you're playing a tabletop 5th edition game in a lot of ways. But does it really matter that Baldur's Gate 3 isn't as faithful to tabletop 5th edition as Solasta? Why is being faithful to a tabletop game important to a video game? There are a lot of folks who answered that it really isn't important at all, and I think their opinion on this is very short-sighted. See, Baldur's Gate 3 is a D&D CRPG in the genre of the other Baldur's Gate games, or games like Icewind Dale, or even the Pathfinder series. What these games all have in common isn't just that they are CRPGs, but they are CRPGs that use a tabletop system. And there's a real advantage to doing this in a video game. The advantage is people playing your game to further explore a tabletop system that they love. Tabletop D&D with your friends, for all of its virtues, is not actually a great way to explore a tactical system, because there's all sorts of time sinks in the tabletop hobby that wouldn't exist in a video game. I mean, to play it all, you need someone who's willing to DM for you, and they have to take the time to prepare a session. You also need friends who are willing to play with you, and then they all need to have time in their lives to play and to play together. Ideally, you meet for 3 to 4 hours once a week, but more likely it's going to be once every 2 weeks or once every month. And in that 3 to 4 hour session, you're probably going to spend less than 15 turns in actual combat. And those 15 turns are all going to be spent with a single character. Tack onto this finally that progression in tabletop is very often very slow. It might take years to climb from level 1 to level 17, so you really aren't able to test all the things you're probably interested in. And when you're in this situation, games like Baldur's Gate 3 start looking very attractive as a means to explore all those ideas you had while playing tabletop D&D that you just aren't really able to explore otherwise. With Baldur's Gate 3, you can boot up the game anytime, and it can be with multiple characters, and you gain levels really quickly. However, if Baldur's Gate 3 isn't a faithful translation of the rules of Tabletop 5th edition, then this appeal is completely lost. All of those ideas that you have, you just can't explore them now because they don't translate to Baldur's Gate 3, or Baldur's Gate 3 doesn't translate them. I think it really ought to matter to Larian that their game has this appeal for fans of tabletop. It's a whole reason a set of people would want to buy their game that has nothing to do with their own choices or their own marketing. It's just free money in a sense. If you just implement the game well, people will want to play it and buy it just because they're fans of another game, and it's so rare to have that opportunity in game development. And of course, we know one of the reasons Baldur's Gate 3 is being made now instead of 20 years ago is right now there's a record number of people who are passionate players of Tabletop 5th edition. The whole idea of this game is to tap into that market, and if you fail to translate the system well, you will be failing to tap into that market. So there are very good reasons for Larian to try to implement Tabletop 5th edition as faithfully as possible in their game, and I believe that means reworking the reaction system to function more close to what Solasta does. But that's not all the thoughts I have. Because, for better or worse, Baldur's Gate 3 isn't Solasta. In fact, it's different from every other CRPG ever made, because it is the first attempt to make a CRPG with a AAA budget. You guys know I'm passionate about CRPGs, and I hope you are too if you are a fan of this channel. But we have to realize, as much as we love these games, they've been playing in the minor leagues since the very beginning. And this game, Baldur's Gate 3, made by Larian, this is our first at-bat in the majors. and we need to hit a home run. And a home run means making a game that appeals to a wider audience than just us folks who are fans of CRPGs from 20 years ago. So what does it mean to make a CRPG with enough broad appeal that it can sell in numbers to justify AAA spending? It's a question no one's ever staked any money on until now, and Larian's in a really tough position. I don't know their finances, but they're not a massive studio when you think of other AAA developers. And they are sinking so much money into this project. I have to imagine that they're in a risky spot. They have something at stake. They're betting on something. And what they're betting on is their faith in this genre of game, and also their belief that they can make it reach a broader audience. And so far from what I can tell, what they think a AAA CRPG needs, what it needs to sell big, is three things: immersion, a cinematic appeal, and an emphasis on choice and consequences. Imagine a Marvel blockbuster movie, with the amazing characters, the insane action sequences, the epic world-ending, multiverse-ending plots. Imagine that. But now imagine, instead of watching it, you are immersed in it, and your choices genuinely matter. You get to decide which character is the romantic interest, which one's the antagonistic sidekick, or the comic relief. You design the hero, and you act them out with your choices. And those choices genuinely affect the story. It's going to be a multiverse affecting plot, but how is the multiverse going to be affected? Well, that's up to you. This thing that you're imagining, that's what Larian thinks will appeal to the widest audience and bring CRPGs into a AAA era. So the big question is, how much can they make a game that appeals both to the old, us base of 20-year-long CRPG fans, and also bring in those new, large audience of players that they need to recoup their investment? Is reaction something that has to be sacrificed on the altar of AAA progress? I don't know, and I don't think Larian knows either. We're all just guessing at this point because this has never been done, but there are good reasons to think that the pop-up system from Solasta, if it was implemented in Baldur's Gate 3, it really would steal from the immersion and cinematic appeal of Baldur's Gate 3. I'm just glad I'm not the one making the decision. It's a really tough decision to make, and even though I want pop-ups and a faithful translation of Tabletop 5e, it might not be what the largest possible audience wants, and in the end, I'm rooting for Larian to cast out that net and bring in the largest possible audience so they can, become fans of CRPGs that I love and watch my YouTube videos. So yeah, that's my opinion. I'm sure you'll disagree. Just let me know in the comments and we can talk about it. Catch you next time.